Welcome to the How to Grow Your Food Processing Business Beyond Manitoba's Borders webinar series, Logistics and Fulfillment Within Canada webinar, that is hosted in partnership with Manitoba Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. Today's webinar will outline alternative distribution models, in-market presence, the financial and operational implications related to your business, and so much more. For those that don't know me, I'm Kathy Sawchuk, and I am a business development specialist with Manitoba Agriculture Value Added Branch. I would like to start today's webinar with a land acknowledgement. We recognize that Manitoba is on treaty territories and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Anishinaabeg, Dakota Wait, the Nisilan, and the Nehethawak peoples. We acknowledge Manitoba is located on the homeland of the Red River Métis. We acknowledge Northern Manitoba includes lands that were and are ancestral lands of the Inuit. We respect the spirit and intent of treaties and treaty making and remain committed to working in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in the spirit of truth, reconciliation, and collaboration. Before we get started, we'll go over a couple of housekeeping items. Everyone's mic has been muted and camera off to minimize presentation interruptions. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please enter them in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, and I'll make sure that they are addressed for the speaker after the presentation. The webinar is also being recorded and will be sent to all registrants next week, along with a brief survey requesting your feedback on the webinar. So let's get started. It is my pleasure to introduce Jeff Fiddick, who is a business development specialist that has worked with Manitoba Agriculture for 14 years. Jeff is a sales marketing professional with over 20 years of progressive consumer packaged goods marketing experience spanning the grocery, food service, home decor, and manual cleaning tools industries. Positions held include Director of Marketing, National Sales Representative and Marketing Analyst, Sales Agent, and Category Manager. Jeff has a Bachelor of Commerce degree with majors in Marketing and General Business from the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon. Jeff has over 12 years of experience in the food industry that includes expertise accelerating revenue growth, market share, the management of products and product categories, pricing, promotion, margins, and retail merchandising for maximizing productivity. Jeff's experience also includes the management and supervision of multi-unit in-store bakery and retail grocery operations, as well as a direct business-to-business sales experience selling to food service and institutional food customers. Jeff, I'll turn it over to you.
Super. Thank you, Kathy. Welcome, everyone. Today, we'll explore opportunities and challenges in expanding distribution of your processed food and beverages beyond Manitoba, with the goal of providing you with actionable insights to make informed decisions about market expansion. The target audience for today's presentation is food and beverage processors who have successfully saturated or near saturated the Manitoba market and are ready to expand within Canada. Food and beverage processors who have already started selling interprovincially and want to explore areas for improvement before expanding further. And most of our clients sell to grocery, so today's content will focus on expansion with a grocery perspective. So first of all, we'll ask the question, why trade interprovincially? Well, there's a number of great reasons. Similar retailers with similar stores as your home market. So there's, Safeway, Sobeys, Save-On in our next door neighbors in Saskatchewan, in Alberta. There's consistent rules of engagement with retailers. The same rules apply here as they do in the other provinces. There's an ability to leverage existing relationships. We would deal with the same person for Sobeys for the entire region of Western Canada. So there's definitely advantages to that versus if you're going to a foreign market and you're starting right from scratch, right from ground zero. You can easily leverage your current success to new markets because if you're doing great here, then why wouldn't you do great in our neighboring provinces? You're going to be familiar with consumer dynamics and trends, and the scalability is realistic. So while it may be enticing to look at a market of 100 million people or 50 million people or whatever, the reality is that if you've at 50% capacity in Manitoba, well, then you could go to Saskatchewan and add another 50% capacity, and you don't need to go to extremely large places to accomplish that. Next, there's the question of food service versus grocery. I know I did mention we're going to talk about grocery, but I just want to mention the significance of the food service sector in Canada. All food that moves through the distribution system to consumers in Canada was valued at $223 billion in 2023. Of that, 49% or $110 billion went through all food service channels. That includes quick serve restaurants, full serve, white tablecloth restaurants, food trucks, everything. On the other side, we've got grocery at 51% and $113 billion. This ratio was a little bit skewed on the grocery side a few years ago, and now it seems to be evening up, which makes sense with trends in terms of people eating out a little bit more. Take a look at the market size. So moving from east to west, we've got us at 1.5 million citizens, Saskatchewan close behind at 1.2 million, Alberta 4.7 million, and British Columbia at 5.6 million. So total market, we've got 13.4 million people. In terms of the north, we've got 131,000 people. And I've not included Northern Canada in today's discussion because it's a unique situation when it comes to market access, therefore would not be adequately served being lumped in with the discussion about the rest of Canada. If we look at the market opportunity in the grocery sector, total Western Canada, 43.5 billion. Manitoba is estimated at $4.8 billion. This is all at retail sales value. Saskatchewan, 4.6 billion. Alberta at 15.2 billion. And British Columbia at 19.0 billion. 0.0, never mind. Now, looking east, we've got Ontario at 15.8 million people. Quebec, 8.9 million people. And Atlantic Canada at 2.6 million people for a total of 27.3 million people. All said and done, we're at 40.5 million people across Canada. In terms of the market opportunity in the east, Ontario market is valued at $34.3 billion, Quebec $24.4 billion, Atlantic Canada $10.4 billion for a total of $69 billion. One thing I find interesting with this is that Atlantic Canada, the sales per person ratio is about 5 times, whereas in the neighboring regions, Ontario and Quebec, it's a little over 3 times. So we can interpret that a couple of ways in terms of saying, well, does that mean that goods cost less in Ontario, Quebec? That's possible because it could be more competitive. It is a very crowded market. Everyone wants to be there. And at the same time, it could be justified because shipping is perhaps more expensive getting out to Atlantic Canada. It could also suggest that that's maybe not as competitive a market as Ontario and Quebec. And of course, with any of these market opportunities, we need to do more research and more in-depth research. Absolutely go and walk these regions, walk the stores in these regions, talk to people, get as much market research as we can so that we have a full understanding before we just start shipping stuff out to these regions. So in addition to research and the market opportunity, we can consider further considerations. And we have a fairly long list of stuff here that we're going to work our way through. So first is in-market presence. And I was kind of between, well, do we look at regulations first to make sure that we are allowed to even sell stuff outside of Manitoba? That's extremely important. Or do we look at the market opportunity? And ultimately, we figured we should look at the market opportunity to understand what's out there, because even if we know we can't sell outside the province, perhaps knowing the size and scale of an opportunity might help inform us about changing our situation, whether it's facility adjustments or product enhancements or what have you, so that we can then pursue that market opportunity. So it's best to make an informed decision. And as responsible marketers, the place to start is with the market opportunity. So in terms of getting your product listed, that's probably the first thing we need to accomplish. So there is an easy way. If you were to call on any of the retail chains at the corporate level, then they would modify their POG or plan O-gram, and that's the retail plan for each of their stores. And they could even push out an order to all the stores that are participating to have your product. However, you may still need to do follow up with the stores to make sure that products are being slotted and the pricing tags are right and everything is in order. If you're listed with the store on a direct store delivery basis, which many of you may be right now, then you need to present your product to every store. Even now, when you're supplying the Manitoba stores of a chain, they like Sobeys, they'll publish a flyer out to the stores and say, hey, this product is now listed, but you're not guaranteed that the stores are going to act on that. So there still needs to be some sort of direct store interaction, in terms of notifying them of this and getting it onto the shelf, and more work from there. Another part about in-market presence is store-level execution requirements. So this includes maintaining the shelf presence, ensuring proper product rotation, building relationships with store personnel. That's important, just in terms of keeping your product front of mind, and identifying local market opportunities. This is also going to be important for promotional execution. Promotional considerations. So you can do corporate planned, even at a direct store delivery basis, but you have to plan them out. I think it's like 16 to 24 weeks in advance. So you need to give lots of lead time, or you can do in-store features as well. And those you can do on a much shorter time frame. So you don't have to do as much advanced planning with those ones. Either way, you need to do something at store level to help implement these promotions. So with any sort of price promotion, I always recommend that you ask for a bunk end or an end display, some sort of off-shelf displays. That way it's going to support incremental sales of your product well beyond just having the standard display on the shelf that not all consumers may notice. You'll want to do in-store demonstrations. That's going to take local level coordination to accomplish that. And also taking incremental orders to support promotions and extra displays. Stores may do that on their own, but if you're asking for the extra displays, if you're doing demonstrations, again, there needs to be a personal component to that. There is also a way that you can run these by remote control, if you will, through the corporate system, but it costs a lot of money. They don't just do it because it's on a promo. If you want end displays in all the stores where your store is promoted, it costs a lot of money to accomplish that. But it is possible to do it interpersonally. Options for market presence would be to use direct employees. So hopefully, if you're dealing out of province, it may not be reasonable for you to think that you can do it all. You may want to have brokers who can do that interpersonal calling with you. They're a little bit tricky to access because they'll often have a whole book of products that are their big movers, and they're going to have limited time with the people in the store, so they may not have adequate time to serve your needs. Full service distributors, so someone like DeLuca's, they may offer a sales as well as a service component in terms of delivery. That could be an opportunity for people working with the stores. Again, it's a competitive thing in terms of you competing with other products that they carry. You may want to look at a shared resource with other manufacturers. It really doesn't make a lot of sense for 10 companies with 10 reps calling on the same store with 10 different products or 10 different product lines. Maybe there's some synergies that can be resolved there. And also maybe virtual solutions. Grocers are a little bit old school in that they do like to see your face on a regular basis. So there is definite value in being at the stores. And it's also a lot of value in knowing what's going on at the stores as well. Okay, so in terms of regulatory considerations, this is just going to be a really brief summary. This is probably its own webinar topic, but just to highlight to you that the CFIA and with the Safe Food for Canadian Regulations, SFCR, require a number of things of you in order to legally and successfully and legitimately ship out of province. So it could be licensing in terms of meeting compliance standards. And that's basically you need an SFCR license for any sort of shipping of any goods out of the province. Preventative controls, so you'll need a PCP or preventative control plan, which is similar to a HACCP plan. That's the new version of it for the SFCR. So basically identifying any risks and then having a plan to mitigate those risks. You'll need a traceability plan so that should there be any recalls or any issues with your products, then you can narrow it down and pull the appropriate products. And that could save you a lot of money versus not knowing and then having to pull everything. Labeling, CFIA, of course, requires proper labeling of products, which includes both official languages, measures declared in a certain fashion, and a proper ingredient and allergen listing, as well as a nutrition facts table. Hygiene and sanitation, you're going to need proper hygiene and sanitation protocols, as well as documenting all of that is done. Training and competency, you're going to want your staff trained in food handling and knowing the proper food safety practices to ensure you're in compliance with the regulations. Record keeping, there is a lot of record keeping involved in terms of making sure that you're compliant with SFCR requirements, and they'll be including production, sourcing, and distribution information. Inspection and enforcement, so the CFIA pretty well does their inspections on a risk basis. So if you are running a meat facility, dairy facility, those are higher risk, perceived as higher risk, and therefore inspected on a more regular basis than something like a bakery. And ultimately, last but certainly not least, is the product category restrictions. So for certain processed foods, your facility must be federally inspected to ship across provincial borders. Also, too, is there may be marketing restrictions. So that could be like with alcoholic beverages or dairy, or just other rules that provinces may have, even in terms of contamination mitigation, where they may use some restriction to close their market to provincial imports. Okay, let's look at potential distribution models. So I've identified 5 different options that you can choose from when distributing your products from our home province out to neighboring provinces. So the one you're probably doing right now is DSD, direct store delivery. And this one is great because it does provide you maximum control over product handling. You're probably the one, or someone near to you is taking care of handling the product, personally delivering it to the stores, hopefully interacting with the people at the stores, talking up the product, getting more displays, etc. Of course, it does have a higher per unit shipping cost. And as you may realize, it's best for low volume or early market entry. It's very time consuming, whether you're doing it yourself or if you're using paid staff. Either way, there is a cost there. However, of course, this may not be ideal for interprovincial trade. If you're to load up your truck and drive to Saskatchewan, there's only a certain capacity in that truck, and again, more time commitment for a small quantity of product. So then we may consider warehouse distribution. So this allows for bulk shipping to reduce transportation costs, provides buffer stock in target market. So this way you can have reserves of stock nearer to your market And if you wanted to do DSD from those points, that would offer some efficiencies. It requires careful inventory management because you got to know what's there, and make sure to keep that stock topped up and rotated. And of course, you may need multiple warehouse locations. So you may want one in Saskatoon, one in Regina, one in Edmonton, one in Calgary, so on. Another one is third-party distribution, or 3PL for third-party logistics. This one here is it's going to reduce your operational burden by quite a bit, because you're basically turning the entire logistics function to an outside agency. You would send them pallet quantities, they would store them. When you get orders, they could pick those orders, they could deliver them to your stores in a DSD kind of fashion. And of course, this is all distribution only. Typically, you're still going to get the orders, which is fine because you can control that and manage that. And then you would shoot the orders over to your 3PL company, and then they would take care of the logistics piece of it. Now, one thing you'll find with this, and if you're looking at the costing of these, is that, well, there's an extra cost for the last mile, they call it. And you may say, well, I don't pay that now, so this is really expensive. But again, back to, there is a cost of your last mile currently on DSD, even if it's you delivering it, because it's your time, it's opportunity cost of not doing other things, or you're still paying someone here who's going to be doing that for you. You may use an independent distributor. So this is someone like a DeLuca's, where they need a bigger margin than some of these other options. So they may need an upcharge on your cost of goods at their dock of 25%. So it takes over some of that operational burden. You may have shared attention with other brands insofar as being on a level playing field with them, promoting all goods in the same fashion. And they may also add value. They may have a sales or order taking component. And then finally, the corporate distribution option, which is chain specific. So for instance, if you were to get listed with Sobeys, and then if you were able to land your goods into a Sobeys warehouse somewhere, and then their stores would order the product, and they would take care of the ordering and the shipping through with their system. And this would be a lower cost operation or alternative, because it's going to be cheaper to ship palletfuls of goods to their warehouses, and then they would take care of the individual shipping as part of their regular shipments to their stores. Now, the only catch with this one is that you either need to be regionally or nationally listed to qualify for this. It's not going to be done for products that are listed in a selection of stores or even in one province. Warehouse space is at a premium, especially for frozen, especially for refrigerated. So it's only an option if you're listed on a larger scale. One other thing with this one is you may now be subject to inside monies payments, because you're more on their radar. They may feel that they can add extra costs to you for the privilege of being in their warehouse and being, your products being served out of the warehouse. We've also heard a lot about penalties being incurred. So if your delivery driver is late to their receiving dock, there could be severe penalties for you. So that's something on the flip side of that one. So next, moving on, is financial implications of considering shipping outside of our province and doing business outside of our province. So we've got a few points under cost analyses, things that you can look at there, and then a couple considerations just with respect to increased scale of operations. So in terms of cost analysis, transportation is going to be a huge part of this analysis. So, and typically you're probably looking at less than truckload or LTL quantities versus TL or truckload quantities. And of course, there's going to be multiple carrier options and different options for shipping. There might be seasonal rate fluctuations. Maybe there's some backhaul opportunities because typically there's not as many goods moving east as there are goods moving west. Um, Another thing too is we've been working with Supply Chain Canada, and one thing we learned is that you tend to do better if you establish a relationship with a carrier and work with them consistently. That may help you gain more consistent rates, which are easier to manage than calling a different carrier every time and just getting ad hoc rates for whatever situation. You're going to more likely to pay higher rates because it's just a rack rate. They don't know you. They're not necessarily uh, aware of your needs on a regular basis. So there's definitely benefits to that, to working with a single carrier on a regular basis. Storage and handling. In terms of storage and handling, you want to look at public versus dedicated warehouse options. Look at your inventory carrying costs. There is going to be a premium if you need special temperature handling, frozen or refrigerated. There may be some seasonality to your storage needs. There's going to be handling fees for every transaction where the goods are moving from point A to point B, or even from one vehicle to another vehicle. Everything is going to have a cost to it. And even if you need to have your temperature monitored to be compliant with SFCR regulations, there's a cost for that as well. Not huge, but there's nonetheless a cost. In terms of market presence, there's a cost for that as well. And again, whether this is yourself or your own person, or maybe it makes more sense to hire an outside representative. But regardless of who's doing it, there's a cost to doing that. The cost of time, the cost of gas, fuel, lodging if necessary, and it's something you want to be considering in terms of your entire cost and profit modeling for this venture. So there's options in terms of, let's say, store visit programs. You can hire people to do that for you, but it's a matter of whether you're getting the same bang for your buck as if you had your own sales representative on a commission who may be more motivated to move more goods for you. You're going to want to think about trade spending. If you've worked with me at all in terms of costing and setting your pricing, you've already been cognizant of that, and you've built that into your pricing so that there shouldn't be much of a shock, if any, to you in terms of now having to actually pay that out. So hopefully that's in your budget. Otherwise, before jumping to a new market, you may want to actually revisit your costing and your associated pricing to make sure that you're going to build in some room for yourself to allow for making trade deals and for some of these sales costs that maybe you're not incurring now, but you're going to need to incur once you're looking at opening up markets outside of Manitoba. Another one is the budget for customer compliance fees and chargebacks. That happens just insofar as if there's damaged goods or stuff is past code, that can be charged back to you. And again, with compliance fees, mostly, like I mentioned, if you're going through the corporate warehouse. Administrative overhead is another thing you want to look at the costs of. So with this is you're whatever you're doing now, if you have the capacity, maybe you're not adding costs. But if you start expanding beyond your current capacity, then those capacities either have to increase, or maybe the way you're doing it has to change. So maybe you got to look at order processing systems, maybe different staff who might be more professional at handling that sort of thing than the people you have now. Maybe it's you right now, and it's just one of your many tasks as CEO of your company. And and now you need some extra support for that. There's, every document is going to take time, so you're going to want to look at ways to automate the documentation process and automate as much of your processes as you can. In terms of increased scale of operations, one big concern or area to think about is cash flow. So you're going to require increased cash to sustain your operations because you're going to have inventory in multiple locations now. And if you're in storing your inventory in a warehouse where you still own the goods, well, you're carrying those goods, and you might be carrying those goods in a couple warehouses in another province, or a couple warehouses per province. So also too is just the whole notion of balancing your trade terms with your vendors, so people who you're buying from, and with your customers. Typically in the grocery situation, your customers are going to pay you net 30 days, hopefully. Now, in terms of your vendors, are they going to give you the same terms, or do they need their money or want their money quicker? So if they want net 15 days, well, you're paying out twice as fast as you are getting money in. So, maybe you need to look at some sort of financing operations to manage that. Or maybe you need to work with your vendors and see if they can give you longer trade terms. Then we have insurance and liability. So there's product liability, transportation insurance, business interruption, and a couple other considerations. This is, of course, an issue right now for you. It's something you want to be cognizant of and taken care of. But when you're talking about shipping to other provinces, having other people, other channel partners helping you with getting your goods to other stores, there's a lot more moving parts, and there's a lot more things that are out of your direct control and responsibility. So you're going to want to make sure that should anything unfortunate happen, it's not going to wipe you out. So you want to talk to your insurance agency and see about coverage for different modes of transport. Temperature excursion protection. So if the temperatures should vary and goods are damaged, or if it's known that they're outside of the parameters required by CFA, they may need to be destroyed. So there's a cost. Continuous monitoring. Let's see here. Response time requirements in terms of making sure things are done on time. Loading and unloading coverage. So there's different situations where you're going to want to be insulating yourself from unfortunate situations. In terms of transportation insurance, I think I already talked about this one. Sorry. Business interruption protection. So this one covers triggers and waiting periods. There may be extra expenses. There may be supplier failure, or even customer caused interruption. So there's various things that can happen outside of your control where you want to investigate and see, is there insurance for it? How often does it tend to happen? And, consider whether it's something you want to be looking at. So really, in terms of identifying here, it's so that you can go into this situation with eyes wide open and know exactly what it is that you're getting into. In terms of additional considerations, so if you're picking an insurance company, you want to look at what is their claims management procedure. What kind of territory limitations do they have? Are they covering the territory that you're serving? Certificate of insurance requirements that may be from your customers, similar contractual insurance requirements. So it may be something where I know that the grocers require you to have $2 or $3 million of liability insurance, so that should something unfortunate happen at store level related to your product, then they've insulated themselves and you have the insurance to cover that. But you may also want to look at insurance for upstream issues, if there's an issue with your vendors. Moving ahead to operational implications, there's going to be infrastructure requirements. So again, if you've got excess capacity right now, maybe you're okay. But maybe if it's looking like you're potentially going to expand beyond your current capacity, you'll need to consider incremental warehousing. You're definitely going to be using incremental transportation, and if your goods need special handling, there's the whole cold chain management process, order processing systems. Again, back to the point of whether what you have now is going to be adequate to serve a larger number of customers, larger market. So you want to evaluate your existing capabilities. You're going to identify gaps requiring investment. Maybe this is going to require some incremental capital. So you have to consider how does that come about? Are we going to need some partners or anything like that? So really, you want to be looking ahead and plan for your scalability, plan for future success. Another one is technology and systems. I've alluded to this already, just insofar as you may be moving from a paper system that has served you just fine in the home market, but now if you're looking at doubling your market size or more, then maybe you need to start considering some modern systems. And my advice would be to implement the modern systems while you're still working in your home market so that you can get everything running smoothly and everyone trained and everyone knowing exactly what they're doing. So it's a very predictable situation when you start looking to market outside of Manitoba. You may want to look at some real-time tracking capabilities, just so you know where your goods are and what's going on with everything. Maybe there's opportunities for integrating with trading partners. And maybe you'll want some analytics for data for just helping with the decision making, with the planning, optimizing where your goods are and when, so that you don't have excess goods sitting somewhere not doing anything but costing you money. So this last slide was a good segue into something called supply chain mapping. And you've probably all heard about supply chains, especially through through COVID-19. Oops, sorry. There. And basically, a supply chain is an entire system of producing and delivering a product or service. It involves multiple stages, from raw material sourcing to final product delivery. It includes various stakeholders, suppliers, manufacturers, transporters, retailers, and customers. So it's everybody upstream and downstream who you're dealing with. And really, it is an interconnected network that transforms raw materials into final products and moves them from, be it farmers or producers or ingredient suppliers, all the way through the entire system, yourself included, out to consumers. And supply chain mapping is basically visualizing this, putting it down on paper so that you can kind of get a visual and then maybe look at opportunities for improvement. The benefits of doing this is that you can hopefully then it'll help you identify inefficiencies, opportunities for improvement. It should help reduce risk, because if you're going through this exercise and visualizing it, it may help you identify weak points in here where the supply chain could break down. Typically, supply chain professionals will recommend that you have multiple vendors for one ingredient. And that makes sense, because should you have a failure with one supplier, you don't have to panic and try and find another supplier. You just simply call up your backup supplier and things keep moving. So it's going to help you comply with regulations, because if you have a clear line from point A to point B, and it's simplified and it's less muddled, then it's going to help you meet any sort of regulatory requirements. And it should improve your sustainability, and not necessarily sustainability from a waste perspective, but just the sustainability of your operation, because it should help to trim out unnecessary costs, unnecessary waste, and make your operation more competitive. The steps for supply chain mapping include identify your key stakeholders. So that's all your vendors, that's your channel partners, that's your customers. Understand your relationships with them, the nature of those relationships. You want to break out your costs and your timelines. So that could be timelines with respect to your trade terms as one thing. It could be timelines insofar as far as the time from ordering to receiving the goods, and all the different moving parts associated with that. And the idea too is you want to be using some technology to optimize this. Okay, so finally, just I've identified some key success factors in terms of the successful implementation of an interprovincial trade strategy. So some best practices, if you will. And I've probably alluded to some of these, but just as a nice summary here. So you want to be strategic. So someone calls you up in Alberta or BC and says, "Hey, I want your product." Well, that's great. And maybe you go ahead and you ship them some product, but it's also better to be strategic and to know more about the market, understand the market, and why your product does or does not belong there. Maybe it's a different iteration of your product. It'd be a different size or different flavor combination. You won't know any of that until you do some research on the market, including visiting the market yourself and seeing what's out there. You want to build strong relationships with your channel partners. I alluded to setting up a relationship with even a carrier who could be your go-to person for all of your trucking needs. Maybe they can also connect you with rail if that's something that works. Or maybe you need a rail person as well. You want to invest in quality control systems. You want to develop scalable operations. So you want to be, like I say, strategic insofar as developing the systems, planning this out so that you're more deliberate in your approach to reaching out to new markets. Like I mentioned, you want to have a market understanding. There may be regional preferences that you might want to be aware of. You may not, you may choose to ignore them if it's not big enough or if it's too disruptive for you, but at least you want to be cognizant of them. Or you may want to adapt your products. You may want to adapt your packaging in terms of what's going on in that market. Typically, new innovations come up from California to the West Coast. So you may see some very different things in the British Columbia market than you do in the rest of the Western provinces. So that's something to be very cognizant of. If there are different buyers for the regions, you'll want to build relationships with them. Typically, that is done through personal interaction. But you can definitely try and do the virtual alternatives if that's possible. And you also want to understand the local retail landscapes. Now, that may be more so in terms of if there's independent retailers you want to penetrate. Typically in Western Canada, about 27% of all retail is through independent retailers. So there is a meaningful segment there. And that might be useful in terms of initial penetration of a market, in terms of kind of testing it out there. Or you can choose to lever your relationships with Sobeys or Superstore or whoever in the Manitoba market and immediately jump to those retailers in the new markets. You'll want to be in a position where you can deliver operational excellence. So there's typically a choice between operational excellence and customer intimacy. So given the number of customers you're going to have, you'll want to be intimate with them insofar as the higher level with the buyers and the people who are deciding to list your products. But the rest of it operationally, you're going to want your ducks in a row. You're going to want to be able to deliver as promised. So that may be, making sure you've got a robust logistics system, maybe investing in automation, computer systems, maybe an ERP system, an enterprise resource planning system, so that you can manage all the moving parts of the ingredients and the finished goods and stuff that's in transit and stuff that's in warehouses outside the province. So there are a number of parts there that you want to make sure are in proper working order, so you or your customers don't experience any unpleasant surprises. And finally, market. Oh, did I do that one already? I feel like I did. Oh, look, we got this one again. Okay. All right. So we have been, the value added branch of Manitoba Agriculture has been doing a lot of work in the last few months, learning about supply chains and learning about food and beverage supply chains in particular. We've already held and published 2 webinars so far about this. They are available on our YouTube channel. We're in the process of developing more resources with more webinars on the way in the near future. So we'd like to extend an invitation to you that if this is something you're interested in learning more about, you can pop us a note, or you can make a comment on the evaluation form that you'll be receiving for today's session. And with that, I'll share with you our contact information. So if you'd like to shoot us an email, it's mbagrifood@gov.mb.ca. And we also have a circular you're welcome to sign up with. It's every 2 weeks, lots of awesome information. It'll keep you informed about upcoming program intakes, other thing that's going on in our industry, conferences, other great information. And with that, I will conclude, and I will invite you to ask any questions, should you have any.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions. So the first one being, you mentioned earlier that one may have multiple warehouses across the country. Would I need to buy a building for warehousing space in other provinces, or is there rental space available for processors? And if so, how would I find out where those potential warehouse opportunities exist for my products?
Great question. There's absolutely lots of rental warehouse space available, and there are even for special handling, like if you need stuff to be refrigerated, if you need stuff to be in a freezer situation, there's, let's say, like a national company called VersaCold, for example, where you can basically call them up. They'll have warehouses in all the major cities, and you would only need to rent as much space commensurate with the goods that you're shipping there. So if you just want to ship a pallet load of goods, you're only renting the pallet load of space. That can sit there for as long as you need it, and then you can pull orders out of there. In terms of finding these, my answer typically is start with Google. We also do, if you want to contact our branch, the value added branch, we have a directory that does include ambient warehouse storage for food products, and also does have some listings of warehouse services that offer refrigerated and frozen service. I'm trying to remember if that's just for Manitoba, but often companies may have national connections. So you may be able to find ones in other provinces from there, or like I say, another option is to do a Google search for that.
So I'll just add to that, Jeff. So yeah, we have a food and bioproduct warehousing and distribution directory on our website that I can send out to you with the presentation recording next week. And that it does identify warehousing, distribution, and transportation options within Manitoba, but it also identifies whether or not they, what areas, I guess, that they distribute to across Canada, or otherwise as well. So there would be an opportunity to take a peek at that as well.
Absolutely. One other thing I used to do, especially when I was hunting for particular um, transportation services, and it was also a great learning opportunity too, is I pretty much, kind of go into a directory and I pick someone that, I liked, whatever, and I'd call them up and I'd say, well, do you offer this service? I was looking for a certain service one time and I didn't even know what it was called. I just described the service I wanted. And they said, oh, you mean a hotshot service? Yeah, that's what I want. So they said, yeah, we don't do that. Okay, well, do you know who does? Yeah, sure. Call this company. So I called that company. Now I can talk like next year. It says, yeah, I'm looking for a hotshot service between here and here. And, either again, yeah, we don't do that. Okay, well, do you know who does? And then you just kind of do it that way. So I guess that was pre-Google days research. But yeah, if you like talking to people, you can still do it that way.
Thanks. Second question, do you have
Mhm.
any recommendations on automation software that is beneficial to food processors?
Automation. So that's a tricky one. I think we would need to know more about what it is you're trying to automate. Like, for instance, if you're trying to automate, uh, let's say purchasing, inventory, raw materials, selection, like all that sort of stuff, those kind of things, then an ERP or enterprise resource planning system may be the way to go. There's also other companies out there that we might be able to recommend where they do have software where you can track everything through your system. If you're looking specifically at automation for machinery, that's another question. We could probably refer you to Manitoba's Food Development Center. They may be a good resource in that case if you're looking at equipment selection. So that one, I would suggest please pop us a note to the MB Agri-Food address and maybe give us a little bit more details if you would, and then we can see what we can do to help you out. That sounds
Perfect.
okay.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Okay, in terms of in-market presence, do you think it's best to have a dedicated in-market sales representative or just to send a company sales and marketing representative to market as needed?
I would say there's great value in having a dedicated person. I actually had my job some years ago for about I did this for about 4 years was I was responsible for Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Northwestern Ontario. That's typically how that territory is divided. You could have a dedicated person doing Alberta, or you could have a person in Calgary with a population of over 1 million people and a lot of stores. A person could probably keep themselves pretty busy just in that market. And when I did this, my job was to go to as many stores as I could and make sure my section was in good order, make sure things were where they were supposed to be. I would set up promotions with the staff in store. Maybe I'd set up some demos if we needed to do an extra push. And I was constantly badgering them for end display space or extra display space. That was my mandate from my principal. I worked on full commission, 100% commission, and it was extremely motivating. In terms of starting someone like that, what they did with me was they gave me like a subsistence level salary per month. And once I achieved a point where I was selling enough goods, and I didn't even have to sell every single piece. It was, even encouraging the movement of goods through all my activities. Then I went over to 100% commission. So to start, you might have someone who's going between there. Like Saskatchewan's nice and close, the Regina in particular, pretty close. Um, there's maybe a couple days work there. Moose Jaw's got some good retailers, another bit there, and Saskatoon a little bit bigger. So, that one I'd probably say added on the heels of a Manitoba rep. But if you're going as far as if you're looking at Alberta, I definitely advocate for a person dedicated to that market.
Perfect. Thanks. How often do you suggest that you should call on customers or participate in in-market initiatives to promote your products?
Depends on the size of the customer, and really with the landscape as it is today, where we actually can work with the likes of Safeway, Sobeys, Superstore, and sell to them on a direct store delivery basis. Those are all going to be A-level customers. And I would say, depending upon the movement that you're getting through those stores and maybe even the level of enthusiasm you're getting from the store staff or the store management, you may want to be in there every other week, every third week, I'd say at a minimum for A stores. And maybe stores, let's say, if they're in the next province, maybe once a month, I would probably say. Just to keep on top of things, just to keep the relationship strong, and again, just to keep looking for opportunities. You constantly we want to be looking for opportunities to put stock out of your section. Typically, when we get into a store, you're going to be in the top shelf of a section in the center store, unless you're selling something to the perimeters. So that's where you're going to be. And, but 40% of the purchases are made around the perimeter. Now, if you take some goods out of center store and you put it in those action aisles around, the walk around the store, consumer could very well complete their entire shop without, really penetrating in center store to any degree. I mean, walk in a few feet, grab an item, then don't have to bother with the rest of the aisle. People don't always necessarily walk every single aisle. It's more of a hit and run kind of a situation these days. So that is something that's imperative. You want to keep that up.
Perfect.
I know, really long answer to a simple question.
No worries. One last question.
Mhm.
Is there an average trade spend a company should plan for to support their product sales and marketing efforts in a new market or an existing market, I guess, for that matter?
Yeah. From my experience, the most of the retailers, like I'd say Sobeys, Safeway, Save On, they've been around 13%. And that's 13% of the landed cost of the goods uh, at the store level. So, 10 to 15% is kind of the recommended level. In terms of superstore, I've always thought they're a little bit lower, but I think they've been kind of climbing up there in recent years. And I think they're probably getting the cost advantages just from labor in terms of cutting down the labor cost internally versus the other retailers. So yeah, I think I've got it budgeted for maybe between the 10 and 15% level. Now, one thing, like I said, is in terms of budgeting for it, hopefully you've done that sooner than later and it's there. But if you do need to do a reset, the time to do it is now before you start entering new markets. And, even if you're dealing with an existing customer, like you're dealing with Sobeys here and you want to, put your product in Sobeys, Saskatchewan, Alberta, you can basically try and justify the reset insofar as saying, I hadn't allocated for this and I know I need to, because I know it's my responsibility to build my product's business in your stores. So I'm going to need funds to do that and justify it that way. So that's the approach I would take, is try and do it before you start penetrating these other markets.
Excellent. Thanks, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff, for a great presentation and providing us with valuable insight into the logistics and fulfillment within Canada.